This is Jeremiah Riggins from Sanctuary Family Farms. I'm married to Katie Riggins, and we have two boys, Ben and Sam, who are 10 and 13 years old. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the cause which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of the ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such a form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Who is America? This is the beginning of the Declaration of Independence. Pretty gutsy if you ask me. Here were 13 small colonies standing up to the British Empire. What exactly were they telling England? That all humans have certain basic rights. They have the right to live and to be free from the oppression of other men, and if we see fit, we have the right to seek happiness. Who did they say these rights came from? They didn't come from rulers, governments, or any other man-made institution. They came from the Creator of the universe himself. Basically, they were saying that all people, regardless of race, creed, religion, or nationality, had value as humans. Imagine if you posted this on the door of any federal building today. You'd be labeled an insurrectionist just like the Founding Fathers were. So what should it mean to be an American? No matter what any revisionist historian wants to write, the ideas of America and freedom were based on Judeo-Christian ideas. First and foremost, there is a God that all of us will have to answer to someday. There will be an accounting for the right and wrong that we have done with our lives, because there is a God. There is a right and wrong that exists outside of human ideas. Second, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In other words, if you don't like it being done to you, don't do it to others. Notice that there is nothing mentioned about race or nationality. So much like Christianity, being an American is about holding onto and living by a certain set of principles. Anyone who agrees to follow these principles is welcome as an American. Anyone who doesn't isn't American. Sounds awful similar to Christianity. Deep in my heart, I love the original ideas of being American. No matter what happens to this country, as long as these principles live on, America would continue to exist. America was the great melting pot that was held together by these ideas. A dying light. In my short life of 45 years, I have seen the gradual destruction of America, not because of finances, with a national debt of $34 trillion, not because of the degradation of our military, even though military recruitment is at one of its lowest points in history, and not because of our loss of rights. Cough, cough, COVID-19, J6, the rich getting off while the poor go to jail, etc., etc., etc. These things will all eventually catch up to us and send the American empire into oblivion. However, it is my belief that what we know as America is already gone. No longer do we hold the principles in our heart that there is an absolute right and wrong determined by God. No longer do we respect the dignity of others or treat others as we would want to be treated. Because of this, right and wrong is now like the new flavor of the month. The right for kids to choose to be male or female, the need to pay everyone back for past harms and punish the evildoers before most of us were even born, the need to protect Mother Earth from cow farts and evil meat eaters, the need to force everyone to follow arbitrary rules because an expert said that's what we should do, regardless of the harm to our fellow humans. No longer do we look out for our fellow Americans and do what is best for all. Instead, we fight and bicker because we must win at all cost or have our ideas destroyed by the other side. This isn't what is coming. This is what is happening now. The principles of being American and what it is to be an American are dead. A new revolution. So when the wheels finally come off the American bus, what are you going to do? For many, when there are no rules to constrain them, they will revert back to their animal instincts and try to survive at all cost, beg, borrow, or steal. For others, they will simply go quietly into the night like sheep to the slaughter. However, for others, there is a calling a calling that says what God says is right, and what's wrong is wrong. We should treat each other with decency and respect, but when this cannot be done, evil should be removed from the earth. This is the same calling that David had when he fought Goliath for cursing God and trying to enslave his people. This is the same calling that Gideon heard when he was threshing wheat in secret, and God called him to free his people. Finally, this is the same calling that many of the signers of the Declaration of Independence felt when they put their names on the line and stood up to evil, regardless of the cost. So in conclusion, I challenge you to put your name on the line. Make a commitment that no matter what happens to this country, you will continue to follow the principles of Christianity. You will love God with all your heart, mind, and strength. You will love your neighbor as yourself. And when you find evil, you will stand against it in whatever manner the Holy Spirit leads you to. Have a great, happy Independence Day.
Hey Barry, your blog is very thought-provoking. You probably weren't born when there was a vice president named Spiro Agnew, I believe under President Nixon, Richard Nixon. And he coined the term and tried to use it very familiarly by speaking for everybody, because he said there is the great silent majority, in which he tended to say, I speak for them even though they won't speak for themselves. Now, in light of this, the challenge before us is one of, is it creating another America? Is it forwarding the Constitution? Is it too late for the Constitution because people and laws and bureaucracies have trampled it underfoot? What do you think the remedy is in all of these situations?
Yeah, so for me, I think the remedy is both a sign of the problem and the remedy is selflessness. At the end of the day, it's the ability to look beyond yourself. So if we look at the founders, we look at the revolution, we look at what brought a new America. They certainly got some benefits from rebelling against Britain, but really at the end of the day, there had to be a whole lot of selflessness to do that. Like you've said before, a lot of them wound up broke or dead by the end of the revolution. So
they said back then, if you sign your name on the Constitution, then you signed your death warrant, because that meant everybody who signed on the line, the British were going to find and kill.
Yeah.
And like you said, many ended in bankruptcy. Some were killed,
Mm-hmm.
I think hanged. But in the truest sense, the left will not acquiesce to the right. The right will not acquiesce to the left. Now, is there need to be a third party, a Christian party? Or how do you think that's going to ferret out for the people who are, I'm not left or right, I'm biblical.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I stand in all that? Where's the place there?
Yeah, so, I mean, you said something earlier kind of addressing what you're saying about Spiro Agnew, and absolutely, I was not born when Spiro Agnew was around. I'm not that old.
I say it, but I am.
But you said the silent majority, and therein lies the problem. It's the silent majority. So when you look at the ideas of Christianity, charity has always been an essential part of Christianity, taking care of your fellow man, right? What was the first commandment? Love God. What was the second? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Mm-hmm. And the church acquiesced their charity a long time ago to some extent. I bet if you looked into it, the church sends more money overseas than it spends at home on their own people. I don't know that, but it certainly seems like that. And so, the problem and why I see even a third party not fixing the issue is because as Americans, we're selfish at the core. If it costs something, we don't do it. The founders of the people who wrote the Constitution, they would have already rebelled at this point.
What would they have done, do you think? They called into the Boston Tea Party because taxation's out the wazoo and $34 trillion in debt, which we can't pay, is absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, how far back do you go? I mean, the death of the empire is not something that's occurred in my generation. It's compounding problems that occurred before my generation. And again, I think those started with greed and selfishness. It was they sold the American dream originally was that you could come to America and have a fair shot at it, a fair shot to be free, to be happy, to pursue happiness. But the American dream eventually became, at first it was a house. Everybody here can own a house. And then it was everybody can own a car. And now it's everybody can have internet and a cell phone. And it just, we have a consumer-based society that doesn't care about anything but what the pocketbook has in it.
See, I see at least two spectrums in our society today. I see what I call the soldiers on the ground, the left, the right, and they're battling each other back and forth, whether it's Antifa or the Proud Boys or whatever it is that they seem to want to form an organization to fight. But they only fight people. They don't fight the ideology behind it.
Mm-mm.
And for us as Christians, how do we fight?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that is a really hard question, because you're asking for something that's organized, and organization is always difficult. But I think it starts on many levels. I think you have people, I think as Christians, you should have people in Congress that are lobbying for things. I think you should have Christian congressmen, because that's the system. I think you should have a whole lot of charity out there on the ground doing for people. If there's, I think of, even some people in our community that really get down and put their feet to the ground, and when somebody needs something, they try to make it happen.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think that what we're seeing right now, and maybe the last days of the empire, as we would say, because, it seems kind of counterproductive that there's some groups out there wanting to feed the people who are poor, who are on the streets and have nothing, and the government comes along and says, you can't do that because you don't have a license to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, why don't you do that then? Why don't you take all these billions and trillions of dollars you're spending on nothing and nobody of any worth and value, and why don't you take care of the people you're supposed to support?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of sending it all overseas to fight wars that are nefariously questionable.
Yeah, and maybe one of the condemnations of the modern Christian church in America is that it isn't really that persecuted. Because maybe if we were doing our job, it would be more persecuted. If we didn't, think of how many preachers kowtow to the politicians, how many, would roll out the red carpet just to, sit down at the table with a politician or somebody of some persuasion or some power. Even our preachers are that way. How many preachers are celebrities instead of just preachers? And
I think the question is, how many are preachers instead of how many are really called of God?
Right.
To do what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have a whole political society of preachers.
Right.
They're nothing more than pulpit politicians.
Mm-hmm.
And yet those few who are really preaching the word, they get persecuted because people don't like the word. Well, that's okay. It doesn't matter if you get persecuted. But I think too, everything is in our mind, and we think, wow, I need to give to it. But we have constantly removed ourselves, I think, from what gives us the understanding of even the Holy Spirit, because I can send my donation into a large organization, and they're going to take 20 to 50% off for administrative and send the other over, and I never know if it gets over there because I don't see the people who really need. I don't touch them.
Mm-hmm.
If I would go down and touch these people who are in need, I think it would change my heart and make me really have a sense of courage or courageous determination.
Yeah. Well, you ask about that third party, or that third piece. I'm absolutely not interested in politics, hardly at all. But what I do know, what I believe, is that one of two things happens with Christianity. When real Christianity is practiced, it either changes the environment around it, or it becomes highly persecuted.
Yes.
One of those, that's the only two options when Christianity is really, really practiced. And I mean, and real practice Christianity to me means, when I was a counselor, and I didn't do so good at this, it's like, are you a Christian counselor, or are you a Christian, and counseling is just kind of the side job? And that's something I'm learning as I get older, is it's a Christian first, and that's all I define myself back by, and everything else is just these very tangential hues to the color. It's still pink at the core, but is it hot pink, or is it dull pink, or is it whatever pink? It only flavors the color. And I think so much so Christianity in the United States is defined the opposite way around. I'm a lawyer who's also a Christian. I'm a president who's a Christian. I'm a this who's a Christian. But Christianity isn't the primary drive.
No, it's not, and it doesn't cover their life. It's just a subset of this. Oh, I go to church on Sunday, I satisfy my quotient.
Yeah.
I think that, and I know this is going to sound radical, but I mean, I've never been that way radical, but I think persecution is what causes true Christianity to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
In China, when they started persecuting the Christians, the church started growing by leaps and bounds.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Romans started really persecuting the Christians, the Christian church just started taking off.
Mm-hmm.
Because people were like, now I have something to stand for that is meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we live in this nefarious attitude of purposelessness, then I think we just sit back and sleep on.
Mm-hmm.
As Jesus told his disciples in the garden, sleep on, the hours pass.
Yeah, I was reading this week about God's forgiveness for us, and we preach, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer says, the church preaches a cheap grace that costs you nothing. And I was struck by how many times in the scripture it said, if you want to be forgiven, forgive others. And it even goes so far as to say, if you can't forgive people around you, God can't forgive you. And so even forgiveness comes with a price and a cost, which means your cost of being forgiven means that you have to emulate and become what God was and forgive other people. You have to provide that same grace to other people. And so we preach cheap grace, and we, as Bonhoeffer said too, we put the pastor on the pulpit, and he's the only one who has to follow the rules. And because he follows the rules, he can atone for the rest of us, sprinkle a little holy water on us, and his righteousness becomes our righteousness.
And if we don't like the way he does it, we get another pastor,
Right,
who will lead us down the straight path.
right.
So I think we need to look at this, because here's a question. The empire of the United States is slipping away. It may have already gone so close to the waterfall that you can hear the roaring. It may have just slipped over.
Mm-hmm.
We'll never know until we look back and see the waterfall behind us. But I think we have to seriously realize one thing. If the country does not change and turn to God, I have to.
Mm-hmm.
Because when God judges the country, if I haven't become righteous, I'll be judged also.
Absolutely. And if you look, so many people are so riled up right now about everything going on politically. And the reality is that the first fight that occurs is the fight that happens inside of you. It's your ability to not look to yourself, your selfishness and what you want, but look to what God's calling you to do. And the things that he's already written, not waiting to be told, but he's already said, seek me, take care of the people around you.
I read something the other day. I was studying on a particular item, and it came across and said, people who have no conviction have no courage either.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is with conviction that courage emerges.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, if my people, and you know what? He said not when my people, but he said if my people who are called by my name. So, good. I think we need to sound the alarm. We're the watchman on the wall, and we're judged for not doing it.
Yeah.
Sitting back and being quiet is not an option.
Mm-hmm.
Great blog. Great blog.
Thanks, Paul.
4th of July.
Hey y'all, thanks for joining us for Around the Supper Table. At Sanctuary Family Farms, we want to be real. whether that's through our blogs, daily verses, or even Nana's recipes. We want to share the messages that God has laid on each of our hearts. If you liked what you heard today or want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook and YouTube at Sanctuary Family Farms or our website at www.sanctuaryfamilyfarms.com, where we share our recipes and blogs and sell farm fresh beef and pork. We can't wait for you to join us again for next week's episode.